Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome to Guns N' Roses Central, and we're doing another episode of Guns N' Roses True Story. So today we're focusing on the year 1995, and we're going to talk about the time that Zakk Wylde almost joined Guns N' Roses when they were looking for a rhythm guitar player. So Gilby Clarke was fired in 1994, and Guns N' Roses had Axl's friend Paul Hughey, or Paul Tobias as he's also known as, come and jam with the band. He played on Sympathy for the Devil, and he was a guitar player that Slash, Duff, and Matt were not really big fans of. So Axl offered Zakk Wylde as a suggestion, and here's an MTV News report from around 1995. He did jam with the band in early 1995.
Meanwhile, sources close to Guns N' Roses confirm a report in the new issue of Metal Edge magazine that Slash has been jamming with former Ozzy Osbourne guitarist Zakk Wylde. Whether it was a whim or an audition for a Snake Pit touring slot or as a replacement for Gilby Clarke and GNR is not yet clear, but we'll keep you posted.
So in 1995, in early 95, Zakk Wylde did an interview with Kerrang! Magazine, and the title of the article was, "I spent a week jamming with Guns N' Roses, Zakk Wylde to join GNR." So Zakk revealed that he actually jammed with the band after an invitation from frontman Axl Rose. So Zakk's involvement with Guns N' Roses was initiated by Axl, who's reportedly taken with all aspects of Zakk Wylde as a musician and a performer. He was insistent about getting him to hook up with GNR and contribute on the next Guns N' Roses LP, and is understood to be impatient to start work immediately. So Kerrang! Did an interview with him and asked him, "So Axl invited you down and asked you to write some songs and play?" To which Zakk said, "Yeah." He said, "Dude, why don't you come down and write some songs and we'll see what happens. If it works out, great, it'll be a blast." He just said, "Hey, maybe we'll be in a band together." So we jammed together for just over a week. We jammed over a whole bunch of shit and came up with 3 pretty cool ideas. That was with the whole band, Axl, Slash, Dizzy, Duff, Matt, and me. We were just jamming together and having a blast. That's pretty much where it stands right now. Things are up in the air. I mean, I have crazy shit happening with my stuff. I'm also doing work with Ozzy, and there's no telling what will happen in the future. I think the guys in Guns are effing awesome, and hanging with Axl we have an effing great time talking and jamming. So the interviewer asked as to whether Paul Hughey's name came up as part of this jam and whether he was a member of GNR after all, to which Zakk Wylde said, "I don't know. When I talked with Axl, I said it'd be way cool that Slash and I could do harmonies together. Crazy shit that'd be fun to play," and the whole band ended up jamming. So he also said, bottom line, he's just a normal dude to me, referring to Axl. Shit happened in the past because things haven't been going great. He has downs, he wants to kick ass and gets pissed if something isn't right. It wasn't like he's this weirdo, and the bottom line is if someone gave me a weirdo head case trip, and I wouldn't care if it was Robert Plant, I'd tell them to go F themselves. I need that like a hole in the head. He said Axl isn't like that. He just wants to jam, and he told me he's bored as F and wants to jam. He also followed up by saying, him and Slash. He said Slash sounded effing killer. He also said that he's got a bunch of good ideas, piano things, and sound really cool. I have a bunch, and I look forward to jamming some more, seeing if they work out. But it's all up in the air right now. I ain't a member of Guns N' Roses. Who knows what'll happen? But if the guys say after a record that it would be great if I did the tour, then it'd be great, but who knows? And around this time, there was a lot of rumors going around that the stuff that Slash wanted to work on was very southern sounding. And so basically the interviewer asked, has the stuff you've gotten together to work with Guns N' Roses on been metal or more southern sounding? And Zakk Wylde said a mixture of both, really. The stuff we've been dicking around with is just heavy hardcore stuff with the whole band jamming. So we also had Duff comment as well as Axl comment on the time that Zakk Wylde spent with Guns N' Roses. So in Duff's autobiography, he said Zakk brought energy, enthusiasm that was lacking within Guns at the time. "We can build on the legacy," he said excitedly. "We can make something great. Listen to this." He saw a piano against the wall and sat down and elegantly played it. "I had no idea he could play piano at all, much less like this." And then Duff also said even when Zakk Wylde and Slash played together, there were a couple of songs in which there was a natural progression and they were very rocking. You can imagine they were some really hard songs. And Duff also said, "We recorded a couple demos with him, but nothing panned out." Now, Axl commented as well in the 2002 press release, referring back to the time that Zakk Wylde was playing with the band. He said, "It brought out some interesting things in Slash. It would have worked to do some songs." Now, Slash talked about the time they jammed with Zakk Wylde in his book. He basically said Axl asked Zakk Wylde to come down to rehearse with us, as well as Paul Hughey. He probably thought I'd like the idea because Zakk was a friend of mine and I respected him as a guitarist, but that didn't really seem like the answer to me. I brought up the option of rehiring Gilby and the idea was flatly rejected. There were endless messages back and forth through Doug Goldstein about Axl's wants, needs, and ideas about what we should be doing. The only way that I regularly talked to Axel was through Doug at that point. Axel would give Doug a message, and Doug would have to massage the words in order to relate it to me. Then I'd give him a message, and he'd pass it along to Axel after massaging it appropriately, and so it went back and forth. At times I'd call Axel, but for most of the time he wouldn't pick up or ever return my call. And then when he did show up at rehearsal, he never sang. My memory of that time is so vague because so little jamming happened. I must say that though the gear was set up nice, all things considered, those sessions cost too much for a lot of uneventful, depressing sitting around. As pissed as I was to have been called home to do nothing, my responsible side kicked in, and I was determined to get something out of it despite the fact that my heart was in my boots. I wasn't sure what to expect from Zakk Wylde, but I hope for the best. He's a great guy. I remember that I met him at Sunset Marquee the night he got hired to be Ozzy's guitar player years before. We hung out in his room celebrating until I passed out in the bathtub. Zakk's personality is like Steven Adler's times 10. He doesn't mince words and isn't scared of confrontation. I couldn't see him and Axel lasting more than a week, but aside from that, when we jammed down at the complex, it didn't make any sense to me. We were two lead guitar players going at songs from the opposite sides of the stage, and it was overbearing. I was used to working with and playing off of a more low-key rhythm player. If Zakk and I were to do this, it would be a whole new trip, more like Judas Priest or something. Even he felt the concept was wrong. That was cool, I told him after jamming for a bit. It was different. Listen, man, he said, that was all right. We could get this thing together. F it, that's cool. But you and Axel have to get the effing band going, man. Get yourselves together and effing get it going. So here's an interview with Slash from 1995, after the period they had jammed with Zakk Wylde and things were still up in the air as to whether he was going to join the band.
He's just a good friend that we jammed with, because now that Gilby's not in the band, Axel was like, well, what about Zakk? You like Zakk, right? And I was like, well, yeah, but we don't sound right. It doesn't sound right with like two heavy lead guitar players. There's no, like the off, usually Guns N' Roses has an off rhythm and a main lead sort of riff, and so now me and Zakk just play the same thing. Right. But that's just because we're both lead guitar players. So as much as I love Zakk, we haven't made any decision. I told Axel, I said, look, I'm going to be gone until August touring with Snake Pit. We'll talk about it when I get back.
Now, fast forward to the summer of 1995. It's still unknown as to whether Zakk Wylde is going to join GNR, and Slash completes his touring schedule with Snake Pit. Now, one thing that's really been overlooked this whole time is that Zakk Wylde and Guns N' Roses have the exact same manager, which is Doug Goldstein. So Zack's timing to gauge a response out of Guns N' Roses for his application could not be worse. Slash was touring, and in the intervening time, Izzy has not only played live with everyone else aside from Axl, but he'd also started doing demos with Duff as well. Now, there was a lot of back and forth during this time between Ozzy's camp and Guns N' Roses camp. At first, people thought that, he was going to be touring with Guns N' Roses, so he wouldn't be playing with Ozzy. So Ozzy did let his thoughts be known. He said, I thought, what the F is going on? What I gathered was that Zakk was using me as a bargaining chip with Guns N' Roses, and that really got me upset. It wasn't fair because I'd always been on level with Zakk, so I called him. Now, Zakk Wylde talked about some of the songs he wanted to do with Guns N' Roses, which ended up being on the first Black Label Society record. So he said one of the riffs ended up on the first Black Label Society record, Sonic Brew, on the track Rose Petal Garden. The stuff that I really wanted to do eventually would have been like GNR on steroids, man. And years later, Zakk Wylde looked back at his time jamming with Guns N' Roses. He said, we ended up hanging out and jamming together, me, Axl, Slash, Duff, Matt, and Dizzy. And I was like, Axl, when are you going to start singing this shit, dude? Let's quit effing around. And that's when Black Label Society was born, because I had all these riffs lying around, and I thought, F it, I'll do it myself. Because it's not because Axl is hard to work for, it's because he cares. He had so much passion, and I'd rather have that than a douchebag who doesn't give an F. So in 2002, after Slash, Duff, and Matt Sorum left Guns N' Roses, Axl put out a statement, and he briefly touched upon the time they tried to get Zakk Wylde and Slash together in the studio. So basically, he was addressing the Paul Tobias rumors and history about him with the band. He said, the public gets a different story from the other guys, Slash, Duff, and Matt, who have their own agendas. The original intentions between Paul and myself were that Paul was going to help me for as long as it took to get this thing going, and in whatever capacity that he could help me in. So when he was first brought into this, he was brought in as a writer to work with Slash. At that time, those guys never suggested one name, nobody else ever. Paul was one of the best people who we knew, who was both available and capable of complementing Slash's style. You could bring in a better guitar player than Paul. You could bring in a monster. I tried putting Zakk Wylde with Slash, and that didn't work. It brought out some interesting things in Slash, but it was a different approach that ended up being overpowering and it didn't bring out the best in Slash. It brought out some interesting things, and we could have worked on some songs, but Paul was only interested in complimenting Slash, laying down a foundation of a riff or something. That would have been an accent or encouraged Slash's lead guitar playing. Now, whether or not Paul was going to be officially on the album or on the tour really wasn't an actual consideration at that time. Now, Axl did a radio interview in 2002 promoting the Chinese Democracy Tour where he talked about the 1995 sessions with Zakk Wylde. Here's what he had to say.
It's like when I tried to bring Zakk and Slash together, that didn't go too well.
Oh, really? You tried to bring Zakk and Slash together once?
Yeah, it was fun to watch.
Really?
It was like, watching, a giant snake with a Tyrannosaurus Rex and see what, so it was pretty exciting. I mean, we had a good time. I don't know if they did.
When was this?
That was about 95.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, I guess if I should ask this, but do they ever talk at all now, or you don't know?
Oh, man, I think they're like, they can be cordial to each other, that whole kind of thing, but when they were actually playing it, it gets that kind of alpha male thing going. Who's the real lead guitar player?
I think I vaguely remember this now. Back in 95, we were talking 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Man, no question about it.
Now, if you guys have ever wondered what it would sound like with Slash and Zakk Wylde playing together, there is some footage from 1994 of them jamming together, as well as some more recent footage as well. And he also toured with Guns N' Roses back in 2011 and actually played on stage with Axl doing the song Whole Lotta Rosie. And then Zakk Wylde's band Black Label Society actually opened some shows for Guns N' Roses as part of the Not in This Lifetime tour back in 2016. Now, Zakk Wylde also commented on Axl Rose filling in for AC/DC as their lead singer. He said, "We all want Brian to get better, and as far as his hearing," Zakk told Metal Wani in a new interview, he said, "That's terrible. I've met Brian, and he's the sweetest guy on the planet. I mean, obviously everyone's rooting for Brian to get better, but in the meantime, while Brian's recovering, I couldn't think of a better choice, and Axl's such a huge fan. Bon Scott is like his guy." He continued, "With me and Axl, we would always talk about our favorite musicians and singers and guitar players, whatever. We both love Elton John and everything like that. Whenever we talk about the bands and musicians, Bon Scott was his. As far as singers go, he was like, that was my guy. So for Axl, I'm sure he's beyond honored, and he could actually, he's going to sing with the guys. It's like Ozzy Osbourne playing with the Beatles, because Ozzy's love for John Lennon, and they're going to ask him to sit in for John Lennon's parts. You know what I mean? Ozzy would be beyond, he'd be speechless. So yeah, Axl's going to be honored, and I think it's going to be awesome, because Axl loves this stuff. So in the meantime, until Brian gets better, I couldn't think of a better way to do it." So that does it for this episode of Guns N' Roses True Story. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What do you think a Guns N' Roses record with Zakk Wylde on it may have sounded like? Let me know. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and be sure to subscribe. You guys can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. The links to my social media channels are down below. I do post exclusive content you can't find on my YouTube channel there, so please go check it out. And you guys can also support my YouTube channel on Patreon as well. I've linked to my Patreon page below in the description box too. Take care.